How could you become legally white? This one piece of paper wasn't just about him, though. This is about how a system worked and how power used paperwork to shape identity. We're gonna talk a little bit about Jim Crow in Louisiana and why on earth would there be a document notarizing you as white? Joseph Perot is getting his document notarized to say, nope, I'm white. You better carry that document with you when you get on the train, when you get on the bus, when you try to go get a drink at the water fountain. Oh no, I've got my papers. I'm white. Notarized. Legally black probably doesn't mean what you think it means. And now, decades later, there's people like me who are left trying to understand gaps in our family's story, things that don't make sense because they don't make sense. They can't make sense. Hi, my name's Danielle Romero. Thank you so much for being with me here on my channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. In 1943, someone signed a document that changed my family's story in Louisiana. It said that Joseph Perot, one of our cousins on the Louisiana side, was a white man, that he was of Spanish and American Indian descent. But here's what it didn't say. It didn't say that Joseph Perot actually came from a long line that included enslaved Africans. That part was totally left out. But two men vouched for him. A notary stamped it. This was a notarized document. It wasn't just something someone did at the kitchen table. And that was that. Joseph Perot was now legally white. But why would you want to be legally white? How could you become legally white? This one piece of paper wasn't just about him, though. This is about how a system worked and how power used paperwork to shape identity. That's why I am writing a book about my experience of finding my family in Louisiana, uncovering my great-grandmother's story and what it has meant to me. Power has resided in documentation. Whether you're documented, you're not documented, you have a document here, who gets to sign this, where. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about Jim Crow in Louisiana and why on earth would there be a document notarizing you as white? So the paper is plain. It's just a few lines of typed text and 3 signatures. It doesn't explain Joseph Perot's life and it doesn't describe him. It just says Joseph Perot is a white man of Spanish and American Indian descent. But he was born to the same branch as my great-grandmother, Lola Perot, and that side carries enslaved roots. That didn't disappear, it was just intentionally left out. Now, that kind of omission wasn't rare, though, in Jim Crow South. This was a strategy. People didn't just pass socially, you had to pass on paper, too. And once the state accepted your new racial identity, you had a much better chance of jumping into another lane. Now, Jim Crow is usually taught alongside segregation. Water fountains, school buses, restrooms, you've seen those pictures. But Jim Crow wasn't just about where people could go. It was about how people were labeled. It was a paper system. If you were legally black, it affected everything. Legally black probably doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not like we're looking at you necessarily and saying, okay, this is a black person. I mean, there are no black people, right? There are no white people. No one is a crayon color. We're gonna get to that in a minute. So people were finding ways to navigate this, including my family. And sometimes that meant filing legal documents to redefine yourself. That's what Joseph did. So I want to just stop for a second though and look what's happening in the law while people were doing this. So these are some real Jim Crow laws that were in Louisiana. In 1902, black and white passengers had to sit in separate streetcars. If you sat in the wrong one, jail. In 1908, it was illegal for black and white people to drink alcohol on the same premises. In 1912, it was against the law to build a black home in a white neighborhood. Now you may be thinking, they're talking about paint. No, they're talking about people. Cities could order it destroyed. Now, what is a black home? What does that mean? Well, according to the one-drop rule in Louisiana, really you only had to be 1/32nd African American, which seems like such a small fraction. It's kind of hard. Like, how would you even figure that out, right? No DNA tests. Well, I'm glad you asked, because concurrently, there's one of the most massive Supreme Court cases of the time. In 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that racial segregation was constitutional, as long as the facilities were equal. But here's what's crazy about this court case. It started in New Orleans. It was 1892, and there was a mixed-race man named Homer Plessy who was legally black under Louisiana law. He boarded a whites-only train car to challenge the state segregation law. This was on purpose. This wasn't an accident. So he was arrested on purpose because it was part of a test brought by a group of Creole activists trying to fight segregation in the courts. Let me tell you why they picked this man. They picked this man because he was 88%, supposedly 88% white. 88%. So I'm less white than this man. Okay, but this is the man they're picking. This is the man that got arrested for sitting with the whites. Now, when the case reached the Supreme Court, the justices ruled 7-1 against him. They said that the segregation did not violate the 14th Amendment as long as the accommodations were equal. And this legal fiction would stand for another 58 years. But the part that is crazy to me is that this man was almost 90% European. Okay, we didn't take a DNA test, but based on what we know about him. Plessy versus Ferguson gave legal cover to these decades of Jim Crow laws, not just in Louisiana, but in the South, because this is the Supreme Court over the whole land in the U.S. And it helped build this paper-based system of racial control that we're now looking at. We're now looking at this document. Joseph Perot is getting his document notarized to say, nope, I'm white. You better carry that document with you when you get on the train, when you get on the bus, when you try to go get a drink at the water fountain. Oh no, I've got my papers. I'm white. Notarized. Let's go back to some of the Jim Crow picks. So 1921, Black and white families couldn't live in the same dwelling. So my great-grandmother was documented all kinds of ways. Sometimes the family was Black, sometimes they're mulatto, sometimes she was white. But she married an Irishman from New York. He was living in Monroe, Louisiana. They got married in Louisiana. They had their first kid in Louisiana. There's no way she didn't know about this law. There's no way that they didn't know the risks. 1932, even Black and Native people now are banned from marrying each other. 1958, blood transfusions had to be labeled by race. You won't believe it. Caucasian, Negroid, Mongoloid. Holy heck, right? So when someone changed their race on paper, it wasn't just about this personal identity. You were changing your legal rights, but you're not changing the perception, right? How people are perceiving you, how you look, your ancestry. But it could change where your kids went to school, if they could go to school, right? Whether you could own a home in this neighborhood or whether your marriage was even legal. That is the level of control we are talking about here. And lest I get harassed in the comments for people saying, well, it's old news, let it go. The Black Blood Law was not overturned in Louisiana until the 1980s. So for Joseph Perot, this one document, did it open doors for him? I don't know. I don't know what happened to this document. But on paper, now he had more property rights. He had more social protection. It meant his children wouldn't be recorded as colored. So that notarized claim changed everything for generations, but it also created distance. Distance from the part of the family that didn't get a piece of paper, couldn't get a piece of paper, and distance from your heritage. I mean, this side of the family, if you're new to my channel, I did a whole thing going down to Louisiana, going to the plantation where the bricks were that our ancestors made and touching them and just kind of sitting with that. And that's this family, okay? And all of that erased with like a notary stamp. These came at a cost, a massive cost. And now decades later, there's people like me who are left trying to understand gaps in our family's story, things that don't make sense because they don't make sense. They can't make sense. That's why I wrote my book. Not to judge what people did to survive, because I would never, but to understand how power moved through paper. I started noticing these patterns in my family, and then oh wow, it's not just my family, so many families. I put myself in people's shoes a lot. You know, that whole adage of walking a mile in people's shoes. I'll walk around 10 miles in someone's shoes because I really want to understand. When I think about that one law of you couldn't have a Black house in a white neighborhood and what that means. Because I'm more Black than Homer Plessy from Plessy versus Ferguson. I grew up with no knowledge of any of this, no hint of any of the family stuff. And the idea that I could build a house, I could have tried to, save, buy a house with my family, think I'm white, think I am okay in the neighborhood, only to find out, no, I'm Black and they're going to destroy my house. If your family is from Louisiana or anywhere in the South, I want you to look. I want you to really look at your family story. Look at the affidavits. Look at the census records, the deeds, the marriage licenses. Maybe you won't find one. I talk about this in my book. I can't find Lola and John's marriage license. My great-grandmother and her Irish husband, I can't find it. I don't think there is one. And to be honest, it would make sense if there wasn't. I think they were probably just married in the eyes of God, like two good Catholics, because you weren't allowed to be married. This isn't just family history. This is American history. And once you start seeing the patterns, you cannot unsee them. And the paper trail doesn't lie, but it can hide things. Like we need everything in that paper trail, even if it's kind of like an untrustworthy narrator, right? But we still want all the information we can get, but it's up to us to pull them back into view. Joseph Perot's story isn't just his story. I think it's all of ours. The only response we should have is just to want to document what really happened, to document it. And that's what I'm doing. And if you're ready, I know you can do that too. And I hope that you will. So let me know what you think. If you'd like to connect with me off of YouTube and join me at Patreon, I'd love to have you at patreon.com/NYTN. And my book is on, it's like 1 millionth draft. And I'm trying to look for an agent that I think will really understand. To me, as much as I love the YouTube videos, I really felt like the culmination of what I'm doing had to be recorded on paper, recorded as a document. And so I'm hoping that all clicks into place. If you have a suggestion, let me know. Otherwise, I'll leave a great video for you to watch as a follow-up, and we'll talk soon.